Trade limitless on HMX, the next-gen decentralized perpetual exchange. Trade crypto, FX, commodities with up to 1000x leverage on the Arbitrum network. Benefit from low fees, multi-asset collateral support, and cross-margin flexibility. Check them out.
From meme to utility, Floki has it all. NFT metaverse game called Valhalla. Floki University, DeFi, charity, and shopping. Floki is governed by the people, for the people. Floki, together there is no stopping us.
Welcome. This has been a sponsored chapter highlighting our partners at Floki and TokenFi, and well, spotlighting so many of the incredible crypto things that has been going on for the past several months. And I'm here joined as your host, Stadius Dunchuk CMT, by my good friend and by the excellent speaker, the VIP guest for today's session about navigating the trends and identifying sale status. And I'm talking about Crypto Caesar. And this man, I got to get the chance, the opportunity, this honor to see this guy perform and speak in front of the people about crypto with such a passion that it's a very, very viral passion. And our today's guest, Crypto Caesar, is basically gonna show us what's good, show us the best ways to navigate the trends for the session. How is it going? How are you feeling, my brother?
Thank you very much for having me, mate. And you know what? I've still got the golf ball from the day we played golf in Dubai the other day. So that's on my desk. Yeah. I keep that on my desk as a memory.
Oh man, that's a good memory. So how's it like? What's changed? How's it been? How busy have you been lately, past several weeks?
Yeah, really busy. You know, it's a busy time at the moment, isn't it? Things are starting to look a bit better. The bear market is behind us. I think we can agree on that. And things are looking a little bit better, aren't they? Things are starting to tick up a little bit in the market. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a few surprises along the way, but I think the bear market is behind us now, so we can look forward to the future, which is good.
Bear market is behind us. We are starting off the high C, right? The bear market is behind us. This is a very strong statement that I particularly like and enjoy, right? Not only because it actually confirms my views, it is actually true because it relies on facts. And Crypto Caesar is gonna talk to us as the very excellent host again for the session, co-host for the session, VIP guest about finding which part of the cycle status we may be looking at, right? So how does it look like to you at this moment?
Well, I think we're in an interesting part of the cycle now because a lot of people are getting probably a little bit too excited, I think, calling for all-time highs in 2023. And I don't think that's going to come. I think if we look back at the past cycles, we could see that Bitcoin doesn't generally like to surpass its all-time high prior to the halving. So I think the likelihood is that we have maybe an all-time high in 2024, maybe the mid to latter part of 2024. But I still think that Bitcoin's got some potential to grind up higher this year, maybe this year, Q1 next year. But certainly there is, I've got 48K, 50K marked as a target. But I think that's, for me, I just put a tweet out a moment ago. I think that's the maximum we're going to get. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that's the maximum we can hope for this year or the sort of the first part of next year, Q1. But if I could share my chart, actually, if I could share my screen.
It's live.
Here we go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you got it? Yeah, okay. So you can see here, this is the weekly chart on Bitstamp. And you can see the cycles, or at least the halving cycles, which are in the vertical yellow lines. And you can see how Bitcoin rallies out of the halvings, pulls back, and then rallies again towards the halving. But what's quite interesting is that in every previous cycle, Bitcoin has always reached out to the Fibonacci 786. And you could see that move to the Fibonacci 786 back in June 2016, where it tapped the top of the 786. Then there was a sell-off into the halving, and then it rallied out of the halving. Similar in 2019, but that was more of an overextended parabolic move, a bit too quick, I think, at that point. But anyway, that being said, it did rally up to the 786, and then there was a sell-off. So looking back at, in history, it seems that Bitcoin likes to rally towards the 786 prior to the halving. Obviously, the first time it did it, it was very close to the halving. The second time it did it, it was quite some time prior to the halving. But we're closer to the halving, and I think for me, this fractal or this cycle seems more similar to the 2015-2016 cycle rather than the 2019 cycle, because we haven't had this strong parabolic move to the upside. We're sort of just grinding and grinding, which is good. I like that, it shows strength in the market. So for me, I think that, there's a really good possibility that we might reach out to the 786 prior to the halving, which would be around about the 48-50K mark, and then there'd be a sell-off. And we both know nothing goes up in a straight line. There's always got to be some form of sell-off, and Bitcoin likes steep retracements. And what's interesting, actually, if you look back at those deep retracements, once it reaches the 786, there's a nice deep retracement, and this one was in fact a 40% retracement, very quick sell-off, then back to grinding. That was in the 2016, prior to the halving in 2016. Then the 2019 move to the 786, there was a sell-off, but of course we had the COVID situation, which is a black swan event. So if we ignore that and we just take it to this level, we had the 786, then the sell-off down to this level, which was a 49% retracement. So quite normal for Bitcoin. So if we were to do that this time, we were to come up to the 786 and then come back to this area of support, or this assumed area of support of about 31K, that would be a 37 or 38% move to the downside, which would be quite normal, I think, and very cyclical for Bitcoin. So that's where I think we are at the moment.
Oh man, I enjoy talking to you so much because you do all the dirty work. You do all the talk. I just shut up. I pretend, I pretend I understand what you're saying, and you do all the work, so excellently. And again, there's gonna be so much of the confirmation bias from my end again, because what you're saying exactly confirms, my anticipation. And even though we don't know what will happen in fact for sure, right? There is no crystal ball to predict the future. There are some patterns that repetitively just appear and resurface and populate and so on. Right? Some of them happen to be those triangular patterns, rectangular patterns, whatever meaning that. And some of those again can be those self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, right? So what you're saying is that if there is this 786, target, if you will, for $48,000-$50,000, that is actually what matches perfectly the breakout, the breakout target as well for the typical seasonal performance of November, right? So November kicked off somewhere, if I'm not mistaken, closer to 34,500 or so, right? Yeah. And if we just want to have play with the numbers, make some projections, forecasting regarding right or wrong, then what we arrive is, if we take the regular November performance and gain of 43% over the years and add it on top of the opening price, so if November was to close on average, it lands exactly at $48,000-$50,000 target in pocket. Right? Exactly. So this is what we call confluence, right? So what kind of other indicators do you typically use to arrive on those confluent numbers?
Well, I've got, this isn't an indicator, but there's another area of confluence, and can you see this? So this is this massive wedge that Bitcoin's created on the weekly chart. And as you know, measuring a wedge, you measure it from the deepest part of the wedge. And that measurement from the breakout actually takes us to 50K as well, which again is confluent with the 786 and confluent with your seasonality argument as well. So there are lots of things pointing towards that mark. Whether it reaches 50K, I don't know, maybe more like 48K, because you know what Bitcoin's like. Everybody likes a round number and it never gets to that round number. We got to 69K, we got to 19 point whatever K it was back in, 2017. But I think close, mid to upper 40K is certainly, I think, doable. But then again, I think there's going to have to be a good sell-off. But what I do think, I think what the fuel that's going to get us there as well is the anticipation, and indeed when the ETF is approved. I think once that's approved, which I think is going to happen either to the end of this year or the beginning of next year, January, which fits perfectly with this move to 50K or thereabouts, and then a sell-off. There's going to have to be some form of sell-off, and I think it's going to be fairly deep. It's going to scare everybody like it always does, but yeah, I mean, there are there's lots of confluence to suggest that 50K is a reasonable target for Bitcoin at the moment. I think coming back to that 31K area is gonna have to happen at some point. You know that, right? Because that was such a significant area of resistance over such a long period of time. We had all of this area here, which was just resistance, continuous 7 months of resistance, which we now assume is support. So it's been flipped to support. But you know what the market's like. The market is going to want to come back and test this area, and I think this area is going to be heavily defended by the bulls. I would anticipate anyway. I'd be surprised if it's broken.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense, right? That makes a lot of sense. And what I've noticed, again, I've been wrong 50,000 times. I've made all sorts of mistakes, lost millions of dollars on on failed projections and so on. And so I kind of like stopped relying, let's say, much of the trading, finances on my guessing, right? Because I get things wrong most of the time anyway. So what I'm thinking is you've touched upon, first of all, the magical numbers, which makes a lot of sense, right? We love those round numbers. It is psychologically, statistically proven that we anchored there, and they're easy to remember, right? So we would just naturally place our orders there, expecting some sort of reaction, which eventually triggers this reaction if this behavior is populated, which you got perfectly right. You've mentioned about the ETF approval, right? So would you mind if we actually talk a minute about this?
Yeah.
There is you've got obviously very good experience in the field and know so much more about the regulations than I do. What's the regulatory impact you think the market is going to see as a crypto, as a total thing, following the ETF approval?
Well, I think that's going to be positive for the US, and of course the US are lacking in regulation, but historically, and in fact, the US always lack in regulation. They're always behind, and you usually find, obviously I'm slightly biased because I'm from the UK, but the UK usually lead in regulation, and they seem to be doing that at the moment. So they've just passed a bill which is going to be made law, I think, or already has been made law, or is certainly coming into force soon. And I think the European Parliament has passed the MiCA bill as well. So, the crypto landscape, I think, is shaping up from a regulatory point of view positively. The UAE have its own regulations, etc. So things are moving forward positively. The Americans, no disrespect, but they're lagging. But we've got an election coming up in November, which fits with your sort of seasonality argument as well. The market's like an election. So we will see what happens, but I think that the US will come around to regulations, and I think an ETF approval, which I think is highly likely. I just can't see why the SEC would knock back BlackRock, who've made with 575 applications and only ever one knocked back. So they've got a pretty good history of doing well with their ETF applications. And when Larry Fink says he wants something, generally he gets it, right? So I think that would be positive for the US. And I think hopefully come November next year, you know, the US will start looking at crypto and hopefully in a more positive light. Hey, we might even get Hester Diaz as the new chairman. That would be fantastic, right? She's very pro crypto.
Oh man, it feels like, you know, it feels like a deja vu, right? Because there are so many discussions that we actually had when we last met, and that was, you know, what I admire about you, man, and what so many people admire you, which is why you have so many followers, you know, on Twitter. Congratulations, is that, you know, you talk about the things in a very realistic, simplistic, and easy to follow manner, right? Which is otherwise very difficult and rough to understand, right? Because what we read, for instance, you know, right now the Fidelity straight news from a couple of hours ago. Fidelity files the Ethereum spot ETF application, right? So all the sort of stuff like questions that I could imagine if I were to enter the market right now, right? There's so much of the incredible, so much of the not credible information, so much of the you know, of the scammers out there, so much of those Ponzi schemes. It's so easy to get wrecked, and you've shared with such a passion, you know, for such a long time already. If you don't mind, right? This is a little bit of an off topic. Like, how did it start for you to, you know, to arrive where you are with all those big numbers and the big success that you have on Twitter right now?
With crypto, well, yeah, I looked at crypto back in 2013, 2014. I looked at Bitcoin. And like most people, I just thought, you know, it was for criminals and for the Silk Road, et cetera, and I completely dismissed it, which was stupid of me. But in 2016, I was looking for something to invest in. Traditional markets were boring at the time. And I came across the white paper and I read the white paper, and then that was the moment where I thought, hang on a minute, this isn't you know, a Ponzi scheme. And it just went from there. And it's like you say, it's a passion for crypto, isn't it? It's a passion. Once you go down that rabbit hole, you know, many people who go down the rabbit hole are still in that rabbit hole now. And a lot of the people I met back, you know, when I started, are still going down that rabbit hole and will continue to do so for many years, I'm sure. But it's just a passion. And I think the community as well is amazing, isn't it? Everybody rallies around. You make great friends. I mean, we'd known each other for many years, but we only met face to face the other day in Dubai. And that was great, you know. I see you as a good friend. There's lots of my internet friends with our internet magical money. So it's good fun.
Oh, and likewise, I feel all the, you know, the love is mutual. What I've been thinking is, you know, what do you think, like, before we jump into the other charts that you have out there, what would you say is the biggest factor that make you so popular up there on Twitter?
I don't know. I wouldn't like to say. I think that you know, I think that I'm grounded and I'm reasonable. I think I'm conservative when it comes to my targets. And I think that anything we do in my group in particular, it's well researched. We're not moon boys. You know, we look at this like traditional finance would look at something. You know, we look at it properly. We don't look at it stupidly. And so I think hopefully that's why people follow me, because they think that, you know, I'm a reasonable person who gives reasonable targets with a professional view, rather than, you know, the crazy moon boys you find on YouTube.
Yeah, that is something that I perfectly, you know, agree that you know, when there's quality, and there's obviously quality, you know, there's no way to arrive at 61.8 thousand people. You know, this is like, if you try to picture that this is a whole big stadium, I don't know how many people Wembley would fit in, but Jesus, man, I mean, 60,000 people. This is incredible number. So congratulations again, right? And I know that people have come in here to admire and enjoy the charts, the technical magic that you share. So what other charts you have prepared for us for today? And would you mind to take us on a journey there?
Let's have a look at the altcoins in a moment. But what I wanted to say actually, and I forgot to say about the Bitcoin ETF, was whilst I think the ETF is bullish for Bitcoin, I think that there are some people on social media who are a little bit too bullish on the ETF. Now, you got to think about what assets these firms have under management. Okay. And my last calculation was about $17.7 trillion under management. But I think there's a latest calculation, which is even higher than that, could be 30 trillion or something. But anyway, but let's just say it's 17.7 trillion. Not all, I think people have got to understand, not all of that 17.7 trillion is going to flow into the market, right? So I think on the most bullish case, I think we could probably agree maybe 3% of that might flow into the market, maybe 3%. But still, that's a lot, and that's going to make the number go up a lot, because there's going to be a supply demand issue immediately. But also the FOMO is and the retail jumping on board of the news, etc. So it's going to push it up a lot. But I think people need to ground their expectations. I don't think Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million on an ETF approval because they're going to sling everything they have under management. They're not going to do that, right? But what we do know, right, for example, from the Bitwise study that was done, I think in 2019, Bitwise looked at adding 5% of Bitcoin to a traditional 60-40 portfolio, 60% equities, 40% bonds. They added 5% of Bitcoin to it, and they looked over it over a long period of time, I think from sort of 2015 to 2020. And what they found was significant. Firstly, they found that the annualized return was almost doubled just by adding 5% of Bitcoin to a standard 60-40. And secondly, and most importantly, they found the Sharpe ratio went up. So, any manager, who was adding or did add Bitcoin to a standard 60-40 of 5% allocation would have been congratulated, right? Because not only did the annualized return double, but the Sharpe ratio went up. So the volatility came down, which is just, that's good. So I think that there's going to be an argument, and I know Morgan Creek is saying this at the moment, and I think it's a good argument that fund managers are going to have a fiduciary duty to add a small amount of Bitcoin to a portfolio, even if it's 2.5% to 5%, whatever. But still, in the grand scheme of things, if in a few years' time, whenever the time may come, when fund managers are adding this standard amount to, then the number's going to continue to go up. But I think everybody needs to understand that adding Bitcoin to a portfolio is really quite positive over a long period of time. Anyway, so do you want to have a look at some charts? Do you want to?
Yeah. Before we do that, of course, I mean, this is, I can only agree with what you're saying, about the positive impact and the Sharpe ratio. Again, those are the things that not many people even pay attention to at times, right? However, they are groundbreaking when you think about that from the financial perspective for the fund managers and so on. Have you heard actually, that by January 1st, 2025, the global central bank, sort of like a union organization, is actually encouraging the central banks spread between the countries to invest, cap of 2% into crypto reserves. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
That's great. I think that was that the MiCA bill? So is that the European banks? Yeah. So 2 or 3%, isn't it? Which is, again, that's significant. And I think that really is a positive move forward that, European banks are recognizing Bitcoin and potentially other cryptocurrencies as assets that they can hold on their balance sheet. And like we said in Dubai, in fact, I think it was you who said it to me, it's for people like us and the people listening to this channel now to continue to spread this information, because as you well know, when you speak to fund managers, a lot of them don't really understand Bitcoin, but some of them are actually very interested in it. So some people are willing to have a sit-down conversation. So as long as we continue to spread the word, then only positive things can come from it.
I love it. And well, I can only agree with that, right? So that's what I said. Full disclosure, I'm so biased not only because I like Crypto Caesar to everybody watching and listening. It's actually that his views align very well with mine. So I need to be very careful not to just override it out of the excitement. Uh, you know, uh,
You're
there
too
you go.
kind.
So we. That's true. That's real, actually, right? So we also have the auto altcoins charts, right? You mentioned, and what I loved
Yeah.
about one of the charts that you showed at the presentation in Dubai the other day is that was the chart that I actually wasn't familiar with. Would you like to run us through it? And I believe it's called Others.
Yeah. Okay, let's check it. Yeah. Okay. So interestingly enough, Adrian, we are right at the top of this chart at the moment. So others, I'll explain to the viewers what others is. So others is the top 150 cryptocurrencies minus the top 10. So it gets rid of stable coins, which I think sometimes might skew or cloud the vision of the investor or trader when looking at altcoin market cap charts. So it does away with that. But what we can see here is, firstly, that there's a clear cycle that has continued previously. So we've had this area of accumulation. Then the halving comes. The halving's here in the vertical yellow, and then the altcoins like to rally out of the halving. Then there's a nice expansion phase to the upside. Then the bear market back down inside to an accumulation phase. Then the Bitcoin halving comes and an expansion. Now, interestingly enough, we are right at the top of this range at the moment. So it'll be interesting. We're having a bit of a pullback there right now, but it'll be interesting to see what happens because we're right at the top of this chart, and I'd be interested to know whether we're going to come back down to the median area of the chart potentially, or whether it's just going to be a clear breakout. But my thought originally was that we would respect this channel. So I'm either right about this or I'm wrong about it. But I think I'll soon, that will be clear within the next few weeks or so. But what we have done is we've come right to the top of the channel now, and we've actually rejected off that top of the channel. But we'll see what's happening, whether that's just consolidating under resistance and it's going to go. But quite interesting at the moment to see what happens with that. Total 2 looks slightly lower. I think the market needs to put on a few more, maybe another 40 or 50 billion before it even gets close to the top. But what I think, which is going to have quite a big influence over this, is Bitcoin dominance. And as you know, Bitcoin dominance needs to be pretty high before we have a proper alt season. I mean, when I say a proper alt season, what I mean when alts actually go parabolic. Alts have been going up at the moment, but generally speaking, they haven't been going parabolic. Obviously, there are going to be some exceptions to that rule, but the general rule is that, at least looking at the past data, that Bitcoin dominance needs to be pretty high. So this is the beginning of the first alt season back in 2016, and you can see how high Bitcoin dominance was then. It was about 95, 96%. And then the alt season began, and as the alt season began, there was a huge, massive decline in Bitcoin dominance. And the peak of the alt season in January of 2018, those first 2 weeks of January 2018, which I'm sure you remember well, was the peak of the alt season. And then Bitcoin dominance at that point was what, 35.3%. So it was very low. It went from 96 to 34, 35%. Then the bear market came, of course, and Bitcoin dominance regained itself. But the next alt season, really, when the alts really started to move in sort of December 20, January 2021, that's when the alts began to move in a parabolic fashion, which obviously continued and became stronger and stronger as Bitcoin dominance fell. Bitcoin dominance at that point, at the point of which the alt season began, was 73, 74%. So again, very high. Then there was, the alt season came, the parabolic move of the alts continued, Bitcoin dominance came down. And arguably, really, this was the top for most of the altcoins at that point. Some of the other altcoins like Ethereum, Solana, etc., continued with Bitcoin to its ultimate high in November 2022. But arguably speaking, 80% plus, maybe more, of the altcoins had peaked out at this point, around about the end of April 2021, before we had the sell-off down to 30K. So this was the high of Bitcoin in November 2022, and now, as normal, Bitcoin dominance is now continuing to rise, and we are getting close to where I think we should be getting to. And my view is, I think that Bitcoin dominance needs to be around about the 58% mark before we see, a real sort of interesting move in the altcoins. Now, obviously, altcoins are moving at the moment, which is great, but this is not an alt season. And anyone who's been through at least one cycle will know that this is not an alt season. An alt season is far more intense and more parabolic than what we are experiencing at the moment. So for me, I want to see Bitcoin dominance up here around the 58%, maybe 60% mark, because what's clear from the past data is that Bitcoin dominance needs to be high before we see that alt season. So I'm anticipating that we see 58, maybe 60% towards the end of this year, Q1 next year, towards the halving. So by the time we get to the halving, I would be very surprised if Bitcoin dominance isn't in the 58 to 60% mark. At the point just after the halving, I think that then it will start to decline. But that will come usually when Bitcoin, as you know, surpasses its all-time high. And once Bitcoin surpasses its all-time high, then the FOMO kicks in, and then people start feeling a little bit more comfortable, and liquidity starts flowing in from Bitcoin and other places into the altcoins. And then off they go. So I don't think we're ready for an alt season yet. I think that comes in 2024. But certainly I think that, maybe you might disagree with me, but I think that Bitcoin dominance needs to put on some weight before that happens.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, right? Because, well, by what we can do, by trying to forecast and predict in a way, set any sort of like expectations for the future, is we can take the past data and refer to it, right? And that's basically what happened the last times we got those series out seasons, right? So what you do is, well, when you lost something, you go to the place that you last saw it, basically, in a way, right? So if you try to set the expectations for the future, you basically take a measure of what it looked like in the past, right? And just try to, expect, set it as an expectation, as a benchmark. And that's exactly what I arrived at, similar conclusions, right? So Bitcoin dominance, the way I think of this when I explain it to, in a more layman terms, is that it's like this main key player, right? This is the magnet, the biggest magnet, like, perhaps aside from Ethereum, the biggest magnet that just attracts a lot of investors, right? So before the ETFs, start and come and asking, about Solana, for instance, and they start asking about, about Polkadot or whatever other, projects, they will ask about Bitcoin, right? Because it's been the OG of this space, similar to Ethereum. So it makes a lot of sense. And another example is when you take a, I don't know, bottle of milk and just mistakenly, by accidentally just spill it all over the table, right? So imagine the milk is the money, right? The market cap, or the money pumping in, the liquidity, being pumped in the market. So what happens is when it just spills, it takes a moment to, just spread equally over the table, right? So it takes time to
Yeah.
arrive for this major alt season. And first and foremost, it takes capital to fund it, right? So the liquidity
Yeah.
needs to be kind of like improved a little bit. We know the interest rates are high. So speaking of the next months, again playing along those forecasts, which I think make perfect sense. What correlation would you see? What relationship would you see between the interest rates and the actual Bitcoin and altcoin prices in the next year?
Well, that's interesting. And that's a difficult question. I think interest rates are going to remain, well, I don't think there's going to be any change in the interest rates until probably the mid part of next year, unless there's an issue and they need to suddenly drop interest rates. But it seems to be a little bit sticky at the moment. So I think they're just going to be higher for longer, maybe. They don't want to be in a position, do they, like Volcker, where they raised interest rates super high, then dropped them, and then interest came back. So, inflation came back. So I think for me, it's hard to say what they're going to do, but it would seem that they're probably just going to sort of higher for longer. Possibly mid part of next year, they might start lowering interest rates, but it all very much depends on what happens in the macroeconomy. It's a very, very hard call because we're not in a situation like we have been previously. A lot of people are calling recession, etc. It doesn't seem to be a recession coming in the US. A lot of people will argue against that, right? But that there haven't been, that there isn't that there's an argument both ways, essentially. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. But we've been through COVID, which was an unprecedented event, right? There was a lot of money printing. So we don't know what the hangover of that is going to be, right? But what we do know is there's a problem in the bond market. There's a real problem in the bond market. And of course, all these banks who were told to buy bonds and interest rates wouldn't be going up. Oh, it's okay. Inflation is just transitory. It's fine. So they were buying bonds like there was nobody's business, and now they're stuck with bonds on a really, really low interest rate, which sucks. So they when they come to sell those bonds, what are they going to sell them for? I don't know, 80 cents on the dollar, 60 cents on the dollar. Who wants to buy a long bond on 1-2%? No one. Not right now, because they can go and buy a long bond for significantly more. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. But for me, I think that plays into the hands of Bitcoin. I think that's bullish for Bitcoin, because if there are bank failures because of the bond situation and because of the mortgage-backed securities they were buying at a low interest rate, then that's going to be good for Bitcoin. I think the downfall of any bank will be very bullish for Bitcoin. So for me at the moment, I think Bitcoin wins on both sides. If there's a risk-on environment, then Bitcoin wins. If there's a situation with the bond market, I think Bitcoin wins. And a lot of trusted, significant sources are now saying that there is a flight to safety to Bitcoin, right? Which usually the flight to safety is long bonds. So interesting to see what happens. But I think that the environment at the moment seems to be very good for Bitcoin. Very good indeed. Not cryptocurrency, but Bitcoin in particular.
That makes sense, right? I mean, you've paraphrased a little bit very rightly, the words of Larry Fink, right, the CEO of BlackRock, basically saying that Bitcoin is a flight to quality. Right, and that makes a lot of sense, because when Larry Fink talks about it this way, right, it means that we might have reached a certain level of maturity in a way, right, certain level of readiness, right, that paves the way again for so many other ETFs. Because if the biggest players comment on Bitcoin this way, right, for the spot ETF, iShares, IBDC, right, then this behavior may propagate as well, right, because it gives you a little bit more conviction and confirmation about the demand behind it. The biggest funds do not just play around with the money when there's no demand for it. There has to be a demand, and there has to be a rising demand, right? Not only in terms of Bitcoin from the intrinsic, quote unquote, intrinsic value, even though it doesn't generate cash flow, it still has this utilitarian value, right? So what you've touched upon very rightly, Caesar, I would say is that Bitcoin is often acts and works as a hedge, right? See what happens with Russia, Ukraine. See what happened with with Palestine and Israel, right? As terrible as those events are, and they shouldn't have ever happened in the first place, right? Bitcoin has actually remained stable, has remained resilient when the whole stock market went down, right? There was some severe corrections across the market. The gold even didn't pick up as much. Bitcoin remained actually resilient, strong, right? And outperformed vast majority of the markets out there. So isn't it a little bit that Bitcoin, you think, might be becoming the synonym of an edge for unstable times?
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, there are arguments both ways on that. Some people will say that there's been no flight to safety for in Bitcoin due to the Palestine-Israel conflict. It's because of the anticipation of the ETF. So we've got these two factors in play. So it's hard to say at the moment, but certainly I think that rhetoric is a strong one. I think that a lot of people are now seeing Bitcoin as a flight to quality or a flight to safety. Because if you look at Bitcoin over time, it beats inflation by huge amounts, right? There's nothing better on the face of the planet than Bitcoin for beating inflation over time. But just going back, in fact, wrapping up the ETF and the Bitcoin dominance chart, I think when we get the confirmation of an ETF, whether that's just a BlackRock ETF or whether they're just going to give an ETF to everybody. At first, I thought BlackRock would get the first ETF, but now I think maybe they might just grant an ETF to all applicants and just let the market decide who they're going to go and buy the Bitcoin from or the ETF from. But when that happens, that's going to drive the price of Bitcoin up. It's also going to drive the dominance of Bitcoin up. And I think that will be the catalyst for Bitcoin dominance getting up to the 58% mark or thereabouts. And that will potentially be the catalyst for Bitcoin getting up to 50K. I think a 50K Bitcoin is going to be very close to 58%. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But certainly there will probably be a moment, like there always is, when Bitcoin sucks the air out of the room. Everything either remains stagnant or drops in price, and Bitcoin just goes parabolic. And I suspect, the anticipation of this news, once it happens, I think the Bitcoin will then have that move up towards the top 40K, 50K mark. And that's when Bitcoin dominance is going to drive up high as well.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. By the way, I just, of course, I got all the Twitter notifications on what you do, because you share such an excellent, valuable content. Would you mind if we take a look at one of your excellent tweets?
Yeah, sure.
So I'm just gonna hold on. Just gonna screenshot this real quick, and there is this. There we go. It should be visible right now, right? So there's this Solana chart, and I think Solana has been buzzing lately, and there's been this very aggressive growth, right? And it just, even on the technical side, it actually confirmed the bull market lately with the trends, with the averages rising. So this reassures that we're not just talking out of nothing. The trends and the numbers speaks for itself, right? Yeah. So what you're saying here is that Solana, you may hate, I don't care about your emotions, which makes a lot of sense. Emotions are not good in trading. I care about winning long-term trends. Solana continues building and securing big partnerships with the likes of Visa, for example. It has also shown strength of late. Perfectly agreed. A $900 SOL wouldn't surprise me this cycle. Would you like to lead us through it in a couple of minutes?
I got a lot of hate for this tweet, as you can probably imagine. But at the end of the day, I think that tribalism in crypto is just stupid and dumb. I did a video of this on the other day. You go to traditional markets, you know what it's like in traditional finance. There's no tribalism in traditional finance. People are there to make bank. They're there to make money. That's all they care about. They don't care about tribalism. It's just stupid. You know, even in the dot-com boom with all the crazy websites and things that were coming out, there was no tribalism then. Okay, I don't recall there being any tribalism then either. So I just don't understand the tribalism in crypto. It's nonsense. And I'm sure your group is the same as mine. We don't care what something is if, you know, if the technicals are good, if it's a good project, you know, if the market cap's right and it's got a good community, etc., the tokenomics are right, yada yada, then, you know, maybe it's worth a play. And Solana is one of them. Solana, for example, this is just a technical target for Solana. So this is just a trend-based fib extension. You know, the trend-based fib extension is a very basic tool that you can use to project what price might come next after the previous high. And these are just the standard Fibonacci 1618, 2618, 3618. And those are the three targets that a very basic trader would look at to take profit. I see an intermediate target for Solana about $77. I don't know what Solana's trading at the moment. Probably close, right? 55. So it's getting close to that target. That intermediate target for me seems to be reasonable. Then a nice little deep pullback, and then maybe toward the end of the cycle, the Bitcoin cycle, we might get those higher price targets. But you know, again, it's like XRP, for example. A lot of people hate XRP, but XRP, if you look at XRP over time, over the last 5 years, I think XRP has been in the top 5 cryptos on CoinMarketCap for the last 5 years. It's had an SEC lawsuit hanging over its head. Despite that, it managed to get to $2 and being delisted on all major exchanges. Didn't have a great run last cycle, but got to $2. That's not too bad considering it had a lawsuit hanging over its head, etc., and being delisted. But now it's got that clarity. I think that for me, that's an opportunity as a play. But what people need to understand is that I'm not all in Solana and I'm not all in XRP. In fact, I don't even own any Solana at the moment, but I do have some XRP. But as you well know, my portfolio is balanced, and the majority of my portfolio is Bitcoin because that's my hedge against everything else in my crypto portfolio. Then I have a large amount of Ethereum, about 25%, and then the other 25% is altcoins. The risk is spread equally over 10 to 15 different altcoins, and that's the way I think, in my view, a reasonable and normal investor should invest. They should spread their risk, make sure the risk is balanced, and ensure that their portfolio is sufficiently diversified with a good hedge in it. So my target for Solana, I got a lot of hate for it, but it wouldn't surprise me if it gets to $900.
Yeah,
it's not that far off its last all-time high if you think about it.
Yeah, you know what the one thing, like I said, I've got a lot of things wrong in my life, and what I've learned about crypto is that it typically rallies far fatter before beyond anybody's expectations to the upside, and it also crashes even more and fatter than anybody expects to the downside in the bear markets, right? So typically, what we expect, something that is improbable, that there is no way it's going to happen. I think, you know, there is some room of and reserve this feeling of reservation a little bit to respect crypto. Like they say, respect the pump, because when it catches on fire, it just goes on and on and on and on, and weeks and days and months, right? Without even pulling back. And the fatter it goes, the more people feeling, you know, this fear of missing out, this regret that they hadn't invested. So they're gonna catch every possible dip, contributing to the pump even more, right? So you've obviously, you know, been for a couple of cycles yourself. You know how that works very well. And to all the viewers and listeners, if you're watching that again, this is the second show, and we are getting close to the wrap of the second show, the Free Trading Congress, the day 4 of our 7-day virtual trade campaign. Just having this excellent recognition for our today's guest, Crypto Caesar. I want to highly encourage and invite everybody who's watching and listening so that you actually have Crypto Caesar on your following list. And you're going to find him right at crypto_Caesar1, crypto_Caesar1. I got him on a following list for such a long time, such an excellent addition for the quality of the information, for the quality of knowledge. Just like we spoke, the conservatism in terms of building the targets, right? Not really selling the dreams, but just being realistic about something that actually may happen, while keeping all the better things. Let's say for later, for the rest. Let ourselves surprise us, right? This is, I think, very rare and infrequent in this, and scarce in this space. So again, please make sure you have that Crypto Caesar on your following list at crypto_Caesar1, right? And there's so much of the interest that this gentleman actually shares for the lawyer, right? He's the lawyer, he's an analyst, position trader, founder as well of Caesar Capital. There's an actual tweet handle for CC Capital, which I encourage you to check out, and founders of Caesar's Palace, which I love the name, by the way, Discord. There's a whole website. You should definitely check out what Crypto Caesar does. And since he's shared so much of the incredible alpha and so much of his knowledge already, would you mind if I ask you one question for the end that is a little bit more personal without revealing too many details? What's your number one hobby, my man?
My number one hobby?
Yes.
Well, it used to be surfing. I used to surf a lot and sail a lot, but I don't get an opportunity to do that so much anymore, but hopefully more so in the future. But I go to the gym every single day. Every single day I go to the gym. I'm there in the morning every single day. Doesn't matter how I feel, I go to the gym and I feel that's good because it helps me level myself out and have a good day. So that's my hobby, really.
I appreciate it. I wish I could serve myself. That would be awesome to have that skill one time. One last question from the audience, if you don't mind. What sources would you recommend to learn more about regulatory developments for crypto?
Say again?
So there's one final question from the audience. Yeah. What sources would you recommend to learn more about regulatory developments for crypto?
What would I recommend to learn more about regulatory developments?
Correct.
Well, you've got to keep up with the news. That's the best place to go. And then once you start reading the news, you'll find out where to go. For example, you'll find out who in England are interested in that, and you'll be able to read the articles from the various law firms that are involved in it. In fact, there's someone in my group who helped draft that particular bill, which was just passed through Parliament in England. So it's just about keeping your finger on the pulse, reading the news and getting the little snippets from the news, and then continuing to do your research there.
That makes perfect sense. Ladies and gentlemen, this legend, Crypto Caesar, excellent, again, lawyer, analyst, position trader, founder of Caesar Capital. Make sure you get him on your following list. That is a kind recommendation. Again, I'm a little bit biased. I'm a good friend privately, so I enjoy spending for the last 55 minutes with you, my friend. And I thank you for your time and wealth of knowledge and generosity for sharing all this stuff with us.
Thank you very much, Adrian. You're an absolute legend. Thank you so much for having me on your channel.
That's a great pleasure. And that's a wrap for today's second session of our Free Trading Congress. Make sure to stay tuned. We're heading right to the next session in a couple of minutes. And that's been Adrian Zonchuk, CMT, as your today's host and a VIP guest, Crypto Caesar. Thank you.